"Shut up, young lady. You know nothing and you have no right to be in my class. Get out of here or I'll drag you out myself." The echo of those words seemed to vibrate against the cold, sterile walls of the classroom. Long after they were spoken, an uneasy silence followed, heavy and suffocating as if the room itself were holding its breath. Professor Clara Vane stood at the front of the room, her shadow stretched unnaturally long by the morning sun. Looming over the students like a dark omen, her face burned with a deep pulsating crimson, a visible manifestation of the rage she no longer bothered to conceal. The hands that usually held the chalk with cold, calculated precision now trembled violently. Stripped of all restraint and professionalism, shaking with raw, unadulterated fury. At Oak Ridge Academy, Vane was known for her strictness, but today something had snapped. The target of her inexplicable rage was Maya, a 17-year-old student with deep, expressive eyes and a look that held a quiet, observant intelligence. Maya had done nothing more than raise her hand to correct a minor historical inaccuracy written on the chalkboard. It was a respectful gesture, a sign of engagement, but in the twisted mind of Clara Vane, it was an act of supreme insolence. "I said sit down and shut up," Vane screamed again, her voice cracking under the weight of her malice. The classroom fell into a petrified silence. Students who usually whispered or joked were now frozen, some staring at their desks, others watching the scene unfold with wide, terrified eyes. The tension was so thick, it felt as though the very air had turned to lead. Maya remained standing by her desk. Her notebook was open, filled with neat, diligent notes. She didn't move. Not out of defiance, but out of shock. She had never been spoken to this way, not in a place that was supposed to be a sanctuary for learning. "Professor Maya," began, her voice small but steady, "I was only trying to help. The date for the treaty was—" "I don't care about the date," Vane roared, stepping toward the girl. "I care about the fact that you think your voice matters here. You come from the outskirts, from the bottom of the barrel, and you think you can stand there and correct me. Always the same with you. Always thinking you are smarter than everyone else because you've been told you're special case. You aren't special, little girl. You're a nuisance." An uncomfortable murmur rippled through the room. A few students shifted in their seats, their chairs scraping against the floor, a sound that seemed like a gunshot in the silence. Vane's eyes darted toward the noise, her gaze like a predator looking for more prey. "Anyone else?" she challenged. No one spoke. She turned her attention back to Maya. "If you can't keep up with the basic rules of respect, the door is right there. Not everyone is cut out for academia, and certainly not people like you. You should be back in the kitchen or cleaning floors, not wasting the resources of this institution." Maya felt the heat of humiliation rising to her cheeks. The lump in her throat was so large, it felt like she was swallowing a stone. Her father, a hard-working man, who had spent his life ensuring she had this education, always told her to keep her head high. But how do you keep your head high when someone is trying to crush your soul? "I haven't done anything wrong," she whispered, her eyes beginning to mist over. "Don't you dare play the victim with me," Vane shouted, now inches from Maya's face. The smell of bitter coffee and old perfume hung around her. "You provoke this, you always do. You stand there with that look of silent pride, acting as if you were better than us. Well, you're not. You're nothing." With a sudden violent motion, Vane swiped Maya's books and notebook off the desk. They hit the floor with a heavy thud, pages fluttering like wounded birds. "Pick them up," Vane sneered. "Let's see if you can at least manage that level of labor." Maya moved slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs so hard she thought it might break through. As she bent down, her fingers trembling as they touched the covers of her books, Vane hovered over her, her presence a suffocating weight. The professor wasn't finished. The silence of the class seemed to fuel her. She felt empowered by their fear. "Look at you," Vane whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. "Bow down where you belong. If you had an ounce of the education you claim to want, you'd know that in this room. I am the law, but you people, you never learn. You only know how to take and how to complain." Maya stood back up, clutching her notebook to her chest. She looked Vane directly in the eyes. There was no hatred in Maya's gaze, only a profound, heartbreaking disappointment. "I'm not you people," Maya said, her voice growing stronger. "I'm a student, and you're a teacher. You were supposed to protect us, not hurt us." That was the final spark. Vane's face contorted into something monstrous. The mask of the educator fell away completely, revealing a hollow, bitter woman consumed by prejudice. She lunged forward, her hands moving like claws. She grabbed Maya's arm, the one holding the notebook, and gripped it with a strength born of pure, unbridled hatred. "You will learn," Vane screamed. "You will learn your place." She twisted Maya's arm with a sudden, brutal wrench. The girl's body was thrown off balance. A sickening wet crack echoed through the room, followed immediately by a scream, so sharp and so full of agony that it seemed to shatter the glass in the windows. It was a sound of absolute trauma. Vane let go as if the scream had burned her. She stumbled back, her chest heaving. Maya collapsed in her chair, her arm hanging at a grotesque, unnatural angle. Her face went from flushed to a ghostly ashen gray in seconds. "I doubt it, I can't feel it," Maya gasped, her breath coming in ragged hitches. "My arm, I can't feel my arm." The classroom erupted. Students stood up, some crying, some shouting for help. The bell for the next period began to ring, its rhythmic tolling sounding like a funeral. But no one moved toward the door. They were all looking at the monster at the front of the room. The door burst open. Mr. Arthur Sterling, the head of the academy and Maya's father, had been walking down the hall when he heard that devastating cry. He stood in the doorway, his tall frame blocking the light. His eyes immediately found his daughter, slumped and broken, and then shifted to Vane, who was frantically trying to smooth her hair and compose her face. "What have you done?" Sterling asked, his voice a low, terrifying rumble. He didn't wait for an answer. He rushed to Maya's side, his hands hovering over her, afraid to touch her and cause more pain. "Maya, honey, look at me, look at Dad." "Dad," she sobbed, her voice barely a whisper. "She broke it," she said. "I didn't belong." Sterling's jaw tightened until it looked like it was made of granite. He stood up slowly, turning to face Vane. The professor began to stammer, her voice high and desperate. "Director," she was being insubordinate. "She attacked me. I was only trying to defend the discipline of the classroom. It was an accident," she tripped. "Silence," Sterling roared, a sound so powerful it silenced the entire hallway. "I heard you from the corridor. I heard the insults. I heard the hate." He looked at the other students. "Is there anyone here who will speak the truth?" For a moment there was hesitation. Then one by one the students stood up. She called her names, one boy said, his voice shaking. She told her she belonged in the slums. The girl added, tears streaming down her face. She twisted her arm on purpose. We all saw it. The arrival of the police was swift. The sirens cut through the morning air, signaling the end of Clara Vane's reign of terror. As the officers entered the room, Vane tried one last time to exert her authority, claiming her years of service, her impeccable record, but the officers, led by a stern woman, who had already heard the preliminary reports, didn't listen. The handcuffs clicked shut around Vane's wrists, a cold metallic finality. "You can't do this," Vane shrieked, as she was led down the past hall, rows of students who watched her with a mixture of horror and relief. I was a teacher. No, Sterling said. "Watching her go, you were a parasite." The recovery was long. Maya underwent several surgeries to repair the complex fractures in her arm. The physical pain was immense, but the psychological scars were deeper. However, she was not alone. The school community rallied around her. The incident sparked a massive overhaul of the academy's policies, leading to the dismissal of several other staff members who had turned a blind eye to Vane's behavior over the years. When the trial finally came, the courthouse was packed. Clara Vane sat in the defendant's chair, looking small and withered without her podium and chalkboard. She tried to plead a momentary lapse of judgment due to stress, but the prosecution presented the testimonies of 30 students and the medical evidence of the brutal force required to cause such an injury. The judge's voice was like a hammer as he delivered the sentence. "You were entrusted with the most precious thing a society has. Its children. You used that trust to vent your own bile and prejudice. You didn't just break a bone. You attempted to break a spirit." Vane was sentenced to 7 years in prison for aggravated assault and hate crimes, with a permanent lifetime ban from ever working with minors again. She was also ordered to pay a significant sum in damages, which Maya's family donated to a scholarship fund for underprivileged students of all backgrounds. Years later, Maya stood on a different stage. The stage of her university graduation. Her arm had healed, though a faint scar remained as a reminder of her strength. She didn't look back at the darkness of that classroom with fear anymore. She looked forward. She had become a teacher herself, one who knew that the most important lesson a student can learn is that they belong, they are seen, and they are powerful. The story of the teacher who tried to break a girl became a legend at Oak Ridge, not as a tragedy, but as the turning point when the school finally chose light over darkness. And in the heart of every student Maya taught, the memory of her resilience burned like an inextinguishable flame.